Hello, my name is Rick Utzler, and today I'll be walking you through the process of how to adjust the Quattro Trigger on your Hatsan Airgun. Let's get started. There are some very important rules that you always need to follow before you start adjusting your trigger. First and foremost, the moment you begin adjusting your trigger, you assume all responsibility for any issues that may arise from incorrect adjustments. If you're unwilling to assume this responsibility, stop immediately and have your trigger adjusted by a professional gunsmith. Now, it is possible to over-adjust the Quattro Trigger, rendering your rifle inoperable. Be aware of this fact before you go turning any screws arbitrarily. Now, you always want to make sure that the gun is unloaded when making these adjustments. And lastly, you'll always want to make your adjustments in a safe environment, paying very close attention to where your muzzle's pointed at all times. Incorrectly adjusting your trigger may put your gun in an unsafe condition, so you have to be very careful. The Quattro Trigger can be found on most Hatsan models. There are subtle differences between the Quattro Triggers found on Spring and Vortex-powered Hatsan Airguns and the Quattro Triggers used in their PCP airguns. Let's start with how to adjust the Quattro Trigger found in the Spring and Vortex models first. Now, this is a typical Hatsan Airgun. This one is Vortex powered, but the process is going to be exactly the same if your model is powered by a spring. Now, from the factory, the trigger is going to have about a 4 to 6 pound pull depending on the power plant. More powerful models like the 125, 135, and the new 150 Sniper put a lot more pressure on the trigger components, and that's going to give it a little heavier pull. Now, this Mod 95 shipped with about a 4.5 pound trigger pull and a fairly long second stage. I've been able to optimize that down to about a 3 pound trigger pull and a very short second stage. Here's how I did it. The manual mentions 3 trigger screws for adjustment. Now, the front 2 trigger screws are quite easy to identify because they're right on the trigger blade. The 3rd screw is located behind the trigger blade and does not have the same large head. This is where we're going to start today. The 3rd screw adjusts the overall trigger tension. To reduce this, simply back this tiny screw out until you stop feeling any resistance. To make sure the screw stays in place, add back 1/4 turn, which will provide a little pressure but not increase the pull weight. The next screw, which is the middle screw, adjusts the position of the second stage. The usable adjustment is very small and usually starts around 3/4 to 1 full turn counterclockwise and continues to about 1.5 turns to 2 turns. It's going to depend somewhat on your particular trigger group, but make very small adjustments and then test to make sure you don't over-adjust the setting. The frontmost screw is designed to adjust the position of the first stage. I recommend leaving this all the way in, as it provides tension to the first stage and prevents the trigger blade from feeling too loose. Now, to test your adjustment, you're going to need to fire the rifle. This is a long trial and error process that has to be approached with discipline and patience. Never dry fire your Hatsan Spring or Vortex powered airgun. One last note on the trigger is that the design of the trigger blade really is best suited if you pull up just a little bit when you pull the trigger. Pulling directly back will actually work against you. If you adjust your trigger pull slightly with an upward angle, this is going to shave a few ounces off the felt pull weight of the trigger. The PCP variants of the Quattro Trigger adjust in exactly the same way, but are a bit more refined and have a greater chance of over-adjustment. Each of the adjustment screws has the same function. The rearmost screw adjusts the overall pull weight. The middle screw adjusts the position of the second stage, and the frontmost screw adjusts the position of the first stage. Adjustments need to be made in very small amounts, as there are no heads on these screws to help prevent over-adjustment. Now, before making any adjustments, remove the air cylinder and the magazine, making sure the gun is completely safe to work on. The average factory pull weight for most Hatsan PCP airguns is around 3 to 4 pounds. This can be reduced down to around 1 pound with careful adjustments and patience. Generally, this only requires turning the tension screw counterclockwise until you're satisfied with your trigger pull. Unlike Spring and Vortex rifles, you can dry fire an unloaded PCP. It's not something that you want to do hundreds of times, but 5 or 10 test pulls with the trigger during this process is not going to hurt your airgun. If you happen to over-adjust your trigger and your airgun is no longer working properly, discontinue using it immediately and contact Hatsan USA service via their website at www.hatsanusa.com. They may be able to help you get things back into specifications. If not, you may need to send your gun in for service. Now, restoring an incorrectly adjusted trigger is not covered under the warranty, so please be aware that service and shipping charges may apply. Thank you for watching this video. Hatsan USA is dedicated to helping its customers get the most out of their Hatsan airgun. For additional resources, please visit www.hatsanusa.com.